The Marc Guzman Podcast Experience.
Welcome to another episode. It's 2020. It is December. We're getting close to the end of the year, and it's been one crazy year. Hopefully everyone's been safe. Today's episode, I want to talk about renovating apartments. It's a very confusing matter for many people, and I want to give you my recommendations, my advice, the tips that I use and learned over many years of doing property management and flipping properties to kind of break down for you my thinking when it comes to remodeling apartment units. So it can be very confusing for a lot of people. It comes down to the material. What material do you want to install? How much do you spend? Will you get your money back? How long will it take for you to get your money back? Will upgrades secure a higher rent price? And what upgrades are the basic necessities? So I'm going to break this down for you in how I look at apartment renovations. First and foremost, I start to ask people, what are your investment goals? And this is what you need to ask yourself with your property. Are you holding this property for short-term or long-term? I typically consider 1 to 2 years as short-term, and anything above 2 years is typically considered long-term. And I'm asking this because if you're holding short-term and your plan is to sell the property, then in some cases, you'll want to keep the renovation costs very minimal and just quickly rent out the property so you've got that consistent cash flow and a full rent roll, and sell the property to a buyer that's going to know they're buying a building at 100% capacity. If you're going to hold long-term, then it becomes wiser to renovate your apartment with higher durability material to minimize the cost of future turnovers. These materials usually cost more upfront, but will save you a lot of money in turnovers down the road. Now, there are some other strategies you can use if you plan to hold short-term and sell the property, because you may still want to invest maximum amount of money into your apartment remodel, because if you can squeeze out the top of the market, and maybe that top of the market is significantly higher than your current rents, it may create value to any possible buyer coming into the property, because they're going to see that there's potential to increase the rent. So again, in some strategies, if it's going to be a short-term hold, like a quick flip deal, there are some cases where you may want to dump in quite a bit of money instead of just keeping it at a very minimal renovation cost. So let's look at renovating an apartment for the long term. If it's a short term, like I said, for the most part, you want to do just basic carpet, maybe shampoo the carpet if it's in pretty good shape. A basic paint job, one tone is pretty simple. And fix any habitability items that a tenant may complain about. Or one easy way to do this is download your local housing authority checklist for Section 8. For their Section 8 inspections, there's a checklist that they go off of to make sure that the property meets minimum habitability warranty. And that's a very good checklist. Make sure everything's taken care of there. And that would be the bare minimum in order to do a short-term flip. But if we're looking at long-term, let's look at flooring first. Do not replace it with carpet. Carpet tends to get stained, get dirty, and sometimes the stains don't always come out. And tenants paying high rent will be picky, and they kind of expect a higher end remodel. They want to make, if you're going to be paying $2,200 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment, at least it's got to be looking very nice, like something out of a magazine. So go with laminate flooring, go with tile flooring, go with vinyl plank. There's different ways you can style it out. Get some examples from magazines, from Instagram. The cost of nice tiles and laminate wood or vinyl planks have become extremely affordable these days. If you're going with vinyl plank and laminate wood, you want to go with a 10 to 12 millimeter thickness, because these are typically going to be rated light commercial use and will be very durable for the long term. You're not going to be replacing these floors every 2 or 3 tenants. These are going to last you 10, 15, or even 20 years. When you're doing painting, do eggshell throughout. I see many people love the matte look, the flat finish. The problem with that is they do get dirty. Dirt adds up very quickly. It gets chipped very easily, and you end up painting a lot more during turnover. So I typically recommend get a neutral color, maybe a two-tone throughout the apartment, but do eggshell throughout the entire place. With the right color, it's not going to look too shiny, and it's going to last. It's going to be pretty durable for any tenant living at the property. When the tenant leaves, you're going to be doing very minimal paint jobs. It's going to come down to a simple touch of paint. One other thing you can do when it comes to paint is maybe add an accent wall. So this is something I like to do in living rooms, is add a dark accent wall with the rest of the property like a light gray. This creates a very unique style to an apartment, and with the right finishes, it shows off as a model home. And again, two-tone, I've mentioned two-tone a couple times. I typically do a bright white for trims, like baseboard trims, door framing, window trims, and even doors themselves. You can go a little bit darker, maybe like a cream white, a Navajo white is also pretty nice for the actual doors and trims. And then maybe a gray for the walls with a dark chocolate brown accent wall. So that's typically a standard, very neutral 2-3 tone type paint job that will look really nice and tenants love. When it comes to kitchen cabinets, you definitely want to go with solid wood. Solid wood has the best durability. Stay away from MDF particle boards. Those will fall apart very quickly and become a pain in the future when you want to get those fixed and repaired, because you're going to end up replacing all the cabinets all over again. If you have older style wood cabinets, I typically recommend to keep those. Especially if they're in good shape. If nothing's rotted and damaged and the functionality is still there, keep those old wood cabinets. They bring a lot of characteristics to the apartment. What I typically will do is get them refinished, repainted, and they're going to look just brand new. And with some nice countertops, they're going to stand out and look very nice. So speaking of countertops, I typically recommend go with granite or quartz counters. Cova stone is another form of quartz that is very durable, more durable and better quality than granite or your traditional quartz. So that's something you want to look at. I typically recommend do not go with laminate or tile counters. With tile, you do have grouting to worry about, and you have to redo the grouting. It's a little bit tougher to clean. And so granite quartz definitely tends to be the ideal countertops for tenants, and they definitely look nicer. And especially nowadays, they have so many different designs and colors. For sure, granite and quartz. And if you can afford it in your budget, do a full backsplash. Now, the full backsplash can be stone, or it could be tile. And because most foods and things that you put on the counter are not going to be up against a backsplash or touching backsplash, here is where I think even tile and grouting would be very easy to clean and wouldn't be that difficult to change out. So you can do a full backsplash from the counters to the top of the cabinets or the whole wall for fairly cheap. And so I definitely recommend that. It's a nice touch. And one thing to also mention when it comes to changing out the countertops, make sure you do an undermount sink. I've seen some people do an overmount sink with new countertops, and it just looks really bad. It's not stylish, and it also, if you don't seal it right, it's very possible for water on the counter to slip underneath the sink and drip down below. So I definitely recommend the undermount, how the undermount sink, and you're not going to deal with those various water issues, and it's going to look very nice. Again, we want to make sure that the apartment looks top notch because you're going to be attracting the highest rent possible in your market. A few other items I would recommend is with older apartments, you should have new light fixtures throughout that match. I've seen some apartments where light fixtures may not necessarily be the same style, may not be the same brand, and it sometimes looks a little tacky. Sometimes tenants notice it. And if a tenant's willing to pay high rent for a high quality tenant, or a high quality product, a high quality apartment, they will want to make sure it looks like a show home. They're paying top dollar. They expect for you to pay top dollar in a turnover. Change the outlets, switches, and faceplates to all white. This is something that's so cheap and easy to do, and at the end of the day, it's going to look super nice. Change everything to white. If you change faceplates to a different color, you want to make sure that the actual switches or outlets are also matching that same color, not a different color. So do that. Again, it's super cheap and adds a very nice touch. And if you have it in your budget, upgrade the windows to double pane. There are many rebates offered by utility companies if you upgrade windows. So check with your local utility providers if there's some kind of discount or rebate. Now, if you have a gas furnace or a gas water heater that supplies each individual unit, what you may want to consider is talking to your local utility company and upgrading those to an electric heat pump water heater, or maybe to electric baseboards or some type of other electric furnace, because there are rebates being offered when you start to electrify your entire building or apartment. So these repairs can get pretty expensive. So one of the big questions I get all the time is, well, how do you determine what to spend? How do you determine the budget? Well, first you want to calculate the market rent with very minimal as-is turnover. And let's say we have an apartment, it's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. And let's say if we did the basic minimal turnover, we can get $1,700 per month for rent. Now we want to calculate, well, what would the market rent be with full upgrades? So let's say we decked out everything throughout an apartment and we can get $2,000 per month. That means there's a $300 per month extra cash flow differential between those two values, which equates to $3,600 per year. At a 6% cap rate, the extra $300 per month cash flow gives you an economic factor of $60,000. This is $60,000 in additional building equity that you would have with that extra $300 a month cash flow. Now, determine how much you are willing to spend for a $60,000 increase in your building's worth. So some investors will typically use a 25% rule, meaning the max spend on a remodel in this scenario would be $15,000. I know some investors that want to maybe do 15 or 20%, and I know some investors willing to go up to 50%. So again, it really depends on your own personal style and what you prefer. But 25% is typically a good rule of thumb. And so if you're willing to spend $15,000 to get that $2,000 per month range, well, now you need to start working with your contractors, your handyman, and electricians and plumbers, and whatever you need to do, whatever vendors you need to get to that point. Start pricing things out. And if you're able to do it for under that $15,000 price limit, it becomes a no-brainer to spend that money in order to get to $2,000. Sometimes, for example, in this scenario, you might determine that it might cost $20,000 to get to that $2,000 a month rate. Well, maybe that might be a little too much. Maybe you're not willing to spend the $20,000. So maybe you want to spend a little bit less. Maybe you bring it down to $15,000, and that might get you $1,950 per month. So maybe not the top $2,000 a month rate, but it might get you a little bit less, and you can go back to figuring out those numbers. So many times you want to sit down, calculate the economic factor you will get out of the building with the various different options of doing a very cheap remodel to a very extensive remodel. So hopefully that helps clarify some questions. And for anyone listening interested in getting some more information or some simple advice, feel free to reach out to me at any time, and I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you again for listening to the show and to this episode, and I'll catch you on the next episode.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you for listening to the Marc Guzman Podcast Experience. Subscribe now on Apple Podcast and Spotify for updates on the newest episodes, and give us a rating.